badass coders, future coders, and engineer extraordinaires. In today's video, let's take a look at the ChatGPT API. Let's create a Python script connecting to the API, and we will use it just like if we were on the website. We will input a message in the API and receive a response back, all through a local Python script. Let's connect to the OpenAI ChatGPT's API using Python. Open up a browser, go to openai.com. At the top of the page, you'll see the API link. Select that. Then select Login. If you haven't signed up, now's a chance to go ahead and sign up. I'm just going to use a Google account. You should get a welcome page to OpenAI. Okay, once you're on the Start with Basics page, you will see some tutorials, examples, and walkthrough guides on building an application using the OpenAI API. What we want to do first is create API keys, which are a way for our program to gain authorization to the API. Select the hamburger menu in the upper right hand corner, then select API reference on that page. And if you scroll down, you will find the API keys page. I'm gonna right click, open up a new tab, then go ahead and create a new secret API key. Then we have an API key generated here. And you want to save the API key, and you do not want to make that accessible to anyone else or the public, or putting it in a browser or a URL, or exposing it to the browser or anything like that. So go ahead and copy your API key, save it somewhere convenient for your project, then hit OK. And now we will use this API key within our project to access the API for OpenAI. I'm actually going to create a new file here and call this API key .text.txt, and I'm going to store the ChatGPT key here, and then save and close this out. That way I have it on hand and in the project for now. So in our main.py file for our Python project, I am going to copy paste what we are going to build. We have two import statements for two packages, the JSON package and a requests package. And then I have an outline commented here for all that we need to include with our build. The API endpoint, the API key, which we got from the authorization for keys at the ChatGPT site. And then we will include an input prompt. That's what's sent to the AI. And we are going to have API parameters, headers, and then send an API request. And we are going to print that response out that we get back from the API inside of our output in VS Code. Now, to actually find the address for the endpoint, we need to go back to the API documentation. And in the API documentation, we will see that we also need to install some Python bindings in our project. So we need to use pip and install OpenAI. So we can do this through our terminal. So in my VS Code terminal, I'm going to install the OpenAI bindings. So I'll run pip install OpenAI, hit enter. And this is going to install the bindings within our virtual environment. Great, so it looks like that was successful. We have the success message here. Before we actually build anything else out into the project, let's go ahead and test the API to see if we get a response back. Go back to the API documentation, go to the section that says making requests and this is going to require our API key. And we can simply copy this request. Now we can go back to our terminal and we can paste this in. And once you have that pasted in, go ahead and hit enter. And then you can see that this is a bad or invalid request and it needs our API key. And then it also gives you information on the URL where you can request your API key. So make sure that you have that API key. Let's enter our request one more time with our private key. The backslash is to go to a new line while keeping all of the information that we enter within the same command. Here we need to enter our private API key. I stored mine in a text file inside of my project. I'm going to copy this and paste, backslash for a new line, -D. Then we have a curly bracket, the double quote, and a colon. Save this as a test. Close this with our curly braces and our single quote. And then hit enter and you can see that we have a response here. And if we go back to the documentation, we can see the type of response that we should expect. So we will have an ID with an object, creation, model with choices, and then this will return that this is indeed a test. So you can see that we will receive back some JSON. In our terminal, we can see the ID, the object, creation model, and then the child object here. This is indeed a test. And it looks like we received back 5 tokens. And it looks like we received back 5 prompt tokens and 7 completion tokens. And then the total tokens of 12. So our authorization API key is working, and now we can go back into our Python project and start building. You can see under the import for requests that it has the little yellow orange wavy line, and sometimes when you see that, a line of code could still work without any errors, but since this is an import statement, we are going to need to import this library, and we can use pip install for that, the pip package manager. So Control Shift backtick to open terminal, pip install requests, and hit enter. And then you can see this package has installed successfully. So we are good to go. We can close this out and start building. So we have the API endpoint. Well, let's name our variable API underscore endpoint. And the current endpoint that I have is this openai.com, and this is using completions. And we may actually change this because completions are deprecated, so we may update that and use models. Now let's add a variable for our API key. And then I will grab my API key here, paste this. Let's create a variable for an input prompt, call this prompt. Type in an input value. This is the question that we are asking ChatGPT. And the parameters that we are going to pass are going to be our prompt, and then the max tokens for the characters, and then a stop. So we can create parameters, open and close brackets here, prompt, call this prompt, max underscore tokens, 128. And by the way, tokens are just common sequences of characters found in text. And so the GPT family of models process text using these tokens. And so it takes the prompt, converts the input into a list of tokens, processes the prompt, and converts the predicted tokens back to the words that we see in a response we get back. Stop. Now for API headers, use the variable name headers, content type, we want to use JSON, then we will pass our API key in here. And then for the API request, let's create a response variable, call requests, and we want to post. And we will pass in our API endpoint here and our JSON parameters. Then our headers. And let's print this response. Now we can run this. Down here you can see we got a response back from the API. And ChatGPT actually sent a response. We asked what the weather was like, and it says that it looks like we're in for an absolute blizzard. And you can see it's actually giving us some commentary on a conversation between, it looks like Donald and Rodney, and even a Michael. Our endpoint is using DaVinci completions, and that's a feature of the OpenAI GPT model, and it powers the API. So it allows the API to generate variations of the input text, and that can be used to generate a variety of different outputs, such as text completions, hence completions in the endpoint, summaries, translations, and more. And this feature is great for using in conversational natural language processing applications, like a chatbot, text summarization, and language translation. Thanks for watching. This was a very basic Python script used to connect to the ChatGPT API, the free version. If you want to see anything else, or you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Catch you next time.